Okay, any questions? Off the top of my head, the CPCS, do you want to get we can get back to you. Off the top of my head, it's below, I don't know how much, but we always end up supping each year. It's different, so we'll take a look at that. But we lower the, instead of 2575, we do 2080 for the CPCS and the private bar. So for who did that? Oh. There are different priorities. Some of the items that we don't know what the final numbers would be, but we do sup. We handled it. We'll handle it that way. Sure.
Microphones, yes.
You also
Sure.
mentioned you're going to want to reverse the curse of the opioid epidemic. I'm wondering in terms of comparison towards from fiscal year 17 from opioids, have you knocked down any of those line items?
Have we knocked down any of the opioid? I don't think so. Right. If it's low, if it looks lower, it's just the earmarks have been taken out. It's all the same or increases with opioid. We didn't knock anything down. No. Who else?
Can you talk about why you did not pay hospital price caps in this budget? Do you have a concern about that strategy, or is it something that you look at?
We decided to look at a more comprehensive healthcare cost containment bill and approach it that way.
Is that something that will be on the table?
Oh, I think probably everything will be on the table with a cost containment, but the working group will look at that
So what would be the timeline for a cost containment bill?
when we're ready. After we're meeting with a lot of the other states, we're looking at what other things they have done. Some of the states are coming here. We are still working on it. I assume it will be this session, but we want to do it right.
What other states?
We've been to Minnesota and Washington and Oregon, and I think there's a couple of others that we have yet to still meet with. Each state is approaching it differently, so we're looking at the systems that are in place that could help lower the costs and move the bend downward for healthcare costs.
Is that for commercial healthcare spending? Is that the focus, or municipal?
We're looking at everything, really.
Senator Jalen talked about the fact that it would take $1 billion to fund the foundation budget, and so you're saying there's not a revenue problem. The spending.
That's fully.
Fully. Can you talk about that? Where's the imbalance in?
Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah,
Sure.
talk more about that.
Come on up.
There is not an excess $1 billion that we could devote to it this year. We need more revenue. We are hoping that something will happen in 2018, that people will pass a tax increase on millionaires that would allow us to increase funding for education and transportation. In the meantime, we want to set up a process that will phase in the Foundation Budget Review Commission's recommendations. This is a very small increment, but it is more than double what the governor proposed. So we are making baby steps, but the important thing that I would point out to you is the recommendation, which we made twice last year in the Senate, which is that in January, when we project revenue, we also project what it would take to get to the foundation budget and how far we will get towards that, so that we will publicly declare what our obligation is and how far we are going towards meeting it. And it will make that a priority. So I think that's a very important, it's not just the money, it's the commitment to a long-term vision. And the Senate is also committed to trying to increase revenues at least in 2018 to meet that obligation.
I just want to make clear, Senator Jalen is referring to a separate outside section of when we do the consensus revenue every January. We would collectively state how much it would take to fulfill our overall obligation and how far this would be taking us.
So when she says you're committed to revenues to fulfill these obligations, you're committed to the millionaire's tax and any other taxes, fees, other revenue that you're looking at this year?
Well, we'll take it at this point year by year, and we are committed to fulfilling our obligation, our full obligation under the Foundation Budget Review Commission's recommendations to implement them. Yes?
Can I just also, I want to clarify something that the $1 billion,
Step to the microphone.
sure, that the $1 billion figure that Senator Jalen referenced is for when the recommendations of the Foundation Budget Review Commission are fully implemented. And even at the stage of the Commission's recommendations itself, the Commission never contemplated that those would be implemented in the space of 1 year, right? It was always envisioned that it would be a multi-year phase-in, just as it was in the 90s after the passage of the 1993 Education Reform Act. So, the legislation that the Senate has twice passed now, last session, codifying the recommendations, always anticipated a multi-year phase-in. So there's never been an expectation that we were going to find $1 billion in 1 year.
Any other questions? Yeah, the Senate budget includes $180 million for an employer contribution. We do it in two different ways. The House did it as a contribution similar to the governor. We said either look at the EMAC, the Employer Medical Assistance Contribution, which is currently paid by employers of 6 or more employees. They pay $51 per employee. To look at that, because all of those employers pay it, it would be easy to collect, similar to a UI system. It's already a system in place. They could increase that, and all of those employers would pay it that way by whatever amount the administration increased. The other option is for some sort of employer contribution, and we gave some parameters so that, for example, employers of 25, the governor had 10 or more employees, we have 25 or more employees, would be covered under an employer contribution. We also direct the governor to look at, as part of the consideration, after meeting with pretty much every employer, business group and nonprofits and restaurant associations, and folks that would be impacted. We really tried to hear concerns and incorporate those concerns into our budget recommendations. So we asked the governor to look at the consideration of whether or not this should apply to, say, nonprofits, particularly those nonprofits that serve the public interest. Special consideration should be made for businesses with a lot of part-time employees. And just it lists some other considerations that we give the governor flexibility, but we wanted to point out the considerations and the concerns that we heard in meeting with all of these organizations.
I want to ask you, Mr. Vice Chairman, about the pediatric palliative care. The governor vetoed, cut something similar. Can you just sort of walk us through the process, what that money goes to, for those kids on the wait list, and what you can do to make sure that in the next round of 9C cuts or in the House of Senate budget conference committee that doesn't get cut again?
Sure.
Yeah.
This was 400,000, we can cut
600,000.
600?
Cut 600,000.
Yeah, so the pediatric palliative care services, when I talk about this, it's hard to talk about because these are kids that are end-of-life services that need these, preparing them for the next step, preparing their siblings for the next step, preparing the families for the next step, the inevitable of what's going to happen to them and their families. It allows the family to accept the situation a little easier, allows them to prepare for the inevitable situation where that loved one is no longer going to be with them, and makes it easier. A lot of these children have siblings, younger and older, and I know I have 2 boys myself, and I can't even imagine going through something like that. So this is a very important issue. It's been a Senate priority. for many, many years. It's been increasing. When I got into the Senate, it was much lower, and then when the chair took over, it went even higher. So we're hoping that, that when the governor cut a significant portion of it last year, many more families went on the wait list.
So just to be clear, this is a state grant program that goes to counseling? Can you just anchor it for us in the reality of what this actually does?
Yeah, so it's state money that goes into the services for our children. So hospitals provide these services, and also the big thing I want to mention as well is, in the whole scheme of this budget, this $40 billion budget, to spend $2.4 million on end-of-life services for children is a drop in the bucket for these children who deserve even more than that. And the fact that it becomes one of these, I don't want to say political football because I don't want to go that far with it, but I will say that this is a line item that if we are true to helping kids and true to supporting our children across the Commonwealth, not just talking about it, this is the last thing we should be cutting.
These are kids that may not have another year to go back on another wait list or hope that we fund this line item.
And just to be clear, it's just for counseling? Hospital get the money and they pay for social services?
And I think there are, yes, some services, yeah, yeah.
The denied kid.
And the family, yeah.
So you talk about trying to find more revenues. Obviously, a lot of the revenue you guys propose follow the lines of like what the House proposed, what the government proposed. Was there any consideration to go further, throw out a big idea in terms of tax or sometimes increase to fund obviously the priorities that you guys have? Is there any consideration going that road?
We had lots of discussion, and we ultimately came up with approximately $400 million in new revenue, which is consistent with the House. The governor ended up with about $500 million in new revenue. So as the Assistant Vice Chair, Senator Jalen mentioned, there's recognition that by all that we don't have the revenue that we need to meet our obligations.
So where is the new revenue? What
I can go over some of it. It's I'm sorry. It's okay. Just all my, okay. We have the 180 for the employer, either the EMAC or the employer contribution. We have sales tax enhancement. That's something that the governor had and the House had as well. That in the governor's and the House, that's $125 million for accelerated sales tax. It's a one-time payment that we met with some of the businesses. They would pay in advance. We met with some of them, and they had some concerns. So like we did with the employer contribution of giving the administration an option, we gave an option here to either have it as an accelerated payment or prepayment. We have $18 million from short-term rentals, like the Airbnb. $7 million from internet room resellers. We closed a loophole there so that we tax the entire purchase price. Here are some of the internet resellers. They buy them in bulk, and they pay taxes on that, but then when they sell them night by night and they increase the price, they don't pay sales tax on that increase. $10 million from excluding out-of-state out-of-staters from getting the earned income tax credit. That's also closing a loophole. $30 million from online sales tax. That's in the governor's as well, and the House, from helping our Main Street businesses and getting sales tax for online companies of more than 500,000 online processes and transactions, certain transactions. The horse race fund, we do take 15 million from that. It's just been sitting there, and we use that for some, that's where we give some of the increases to DEP and DCR. We use it for conservation and recreation and for consistent with the original purpose. No, it just it takes it. yeah.
How much would you have to bond have to take out?
I think there's going to be at least 5 million, and then more is consistently put in, so it'll, that's for another day to look at the whole law. We don't do that. And then there's just some other minor, but that's the bulk of what the revenue is that we do.
The governor and the speaker's opposition to broad-based taxes influence your approach to new revenue? It seems to stay closely in line with the governor and the speaker in the House budget route.
Well, I think that if you look at it, it's a little different. There are some similarities, and the House is a little different than the governor. The Senate's a little different than the House and the governor. We, again, looked at the fiscal situation, and we based our recommendations accordingly.
Do you feel you're waiting for the millionaire's tax for a significant infusion of new revenue?
I think that if that should pass, that certainly would be helpful for education and transportation, which desperately needs funds, as you've heard from all of my colleagues and probably across the state. So we'll see what happens, but we're also balancing by raising some revenue this year.
Does this budget follow the history and start with the governor and the legislature as well of diverting money from cap gains taxes and to the state fund under the statute?
We do take some to put to the general fund, but we also, 51 million, but we also direct 98.5 million to go into the stabilization fund. That has been a Senate priority, and I would love to say that we would put all of it towards the stabilization. We need to rebuild that stabilization fund, but as you hear from just even the colleagues that are here, there are many very real needs, and so again, we're trying to balance out the whole process.
Is that the same as the governor, or the 51 million?
Yes, yes.
And what's the total one-time revenues that was
Well, we take 125 from sales tax, 15 from the horse racing fund, and then the 50, was it 51? 51, we count cap gains as the one-time sales. The House and the governor do not. So if you were going to do apples to apples, you'd take that out, yeah.
Will you have to scramble at the end of June if the revenue figures continue their downward trend?
We will certainly take a look at that. You know, I certainly, hope against hope that revenue starts swinging upward. If need be, we will be ready to do that, and by July 1st, have a balanced budget on the governor's desk.
I noticed you don't have transportation in all the things you detail here. Is that by, you don't have anything to say about transportation, or?
A lot of transportation isn't online. There are the transfers that we've had before. The RTAs are getting, I think, 83 million out of this budget as an increase in recognition that so many parts of our state rely upon the bus service that RTAs provide as a critical lifeline to move their folks around. And the regular transportation pieces, we do a lot of transportation like in Chapter 90 and bonding bills and bridge and road and other things. So there is a lot of funding that goes out to our communities and is available to the state for transportation.
Does your budget give them that $181 million appropriation for the teams?
That was 187 million. We actually do 127, which is what the administration used this year.
Oh, and the rest is bonded?
They used, I think, for capital, so we assume that if they don't need it, that there's, as you heard, so many other needs, that we would use it for other items in our budget. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.